Hello and welcome to this episode of RPGGamer Top 5s. And this time we're going to do the top 5 Star Trek characters. Now, I love me some Star Trek, and even those of the series which aren't my favourites, I still find more watchable than much of the sci-fi television today. There's just something uplifting about watching a bunch of professionals working together without any arguing and backstabbing, which just relaxes me. But the highlight of Star Trek has always been the characters. From the original series, where even though they weren't given much screen time, you learnt so much about each of the characters. Sulu loved swashbuckling stories and botany, Scotty loved his engines and hated shore leave, etc, etc. The Next Generation introduced more fantastic characters, although I don't think the writers knew which ones were going to be popular, as those featured heavily earlier on definitely didn't end up with the most interesting plotlines later on. Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery and now Picard all introduced groups of varied characters, with some carrying poor plots through sheer personality. So, we've had a poll, and these are the top 5. However, before I go on, I want to make mention of 2 characters which featured in the top 10. The character of Q at number 8, with 2,791 votes, and the character of Elim Garak at number 10, with 1,999 votes. I want to mention these, as these aren't main characters in any of the series, and in fact were introduced as antagonists, featuring only in a handful of episodes. Yet, through skillful writing and fantastic acting, they became fully rounded characters which are loved and discussed to this day. And with that, let's get on with the countdown. At number 5, James Tiberius Kirk, played by William Shatner in Star Trek the original series, with 3,465 votes. So, Captain Kirk, what hasn't been said about him before? The captain of the Starship Enterprise in the original series. He's the shirt-ripping, all-action hero who always gets the girl, no matter what colour she is. His background is a little confused, even more so with the time-twisting events of the rebooted Star Trek movies. Apparently born in Iowa, or aboard the USS Kelvin, he has a brother, George Samuel, also portrayed by Shatner, although apparently not in the Kelvinverse. As a young man, he was one of the few survivors of the famine on Tarsus 4 and the executions ordered by the leader of the colony to extend the food supplies, and he became the youngest captain in Starfleet. Shatner's portrayal of the character was always a bit over the top, and the actor was referred to as the male Fay Ray because of his ability to scream. And while I love me some Shatner as Kirk, I have to admit that the character never really lived up to the mythos around him. In universe, they speak of the crew being loyal to Kirk because he breaks the rules, but breaks the rules for them. So they virtually worship the man and are totally devoted to him, much in the same way as the Horatio Hornblower character that Kirk is based upon. However, this isn't something we really see in the series, because while the crew displays the emotions, I personally can't think of one occasion when Kirk really goes out of his way for a member of his crew, except when the entire crew does it for Spock in Star Trek 3. At number 4, 7 of 9, played by Jeri Ryan in Star Trek Voyager, with 3,559 votes. While it's easy to dismiss 7 of 9 as just a piece of eye candy put into the series to keep the fanboys happy, Jeri Ryan herself is an excellent actress and brought her talents to the character and stopped it being quite so one-dimensional. And with the recent Picard series, she's proven once again to be a compelling actress capable of carrying a storyline with skill. And especially among the characters in Voyager, she stood out from the crowd. Although I might suggest that it would be difficult, as personally I always found the only likeable character in the show to be the holographic Doctor. 709 was once Annika Hansen, a human child abducted by the Borg and implanted with their cybernetic systems and incorporated into their collective consciousness. Rescued by the crew of the Starship Voyager, she at first wanted to return to the Borg and rejoin them, as it was the only life she'd ever known, but eventually embraced her humanity and became an essential part of the crew. Her disconnection from the Borg meant that some of her cybernetic systems had to be removed, and she had to wear a skin-tight Lycra bodysuit to maintain her vital systems, although many would say it was just to show off the actress's figure. And number 3, Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy in Star Trek the original series, with 4,087 votes. And we're back to the original series, and perhaps the most iconic figure from it. The half-Vulcan, half-human Mr. Spock, the science and first officer of the Starship Enterprise. Spock is the original outsider alien character, a character type mimicked so often in the various sequel series, with Data and Worf in Star Trek Next Generation, Odo in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the holographic Doctor and 709 in Star Trek Voyager, and bringing it up to date with Sulu in Star Trek Discovery. Being a half-breed, Spock is somewhat of an outcast from both of his species who consider him alien. But in most significant ways, Spock is fairly indistinguishable from a full Vulcan, having green blood, and therefore a greenish tinge to his skin, pointed ears, and various abilities beyond those of a human. But his most alien feature is his apparent lack of emotions and reliance on logic instead of instinct. But one of the details I find most interesting as a Star Trek fan is that Vulcans are not emotionless, they just rein them in and do not show them. In fact, Vulcan emotions are far stronger than human ones, so much so that they brought the entire species to the edge of destruction in a planet-wide war, and only the strict rules about controlling their emotions allowed this species to survive and prosper. The subtlety in both Nimoy's acting to show this, and that by Mark Leonard, who played Spock's father Sarek, is wonderful to behold. Moments when you see them move to react emotionally, or even display emotion, and then they clamp down on it to keep their calm and emotionless exterior is wonderful and fascinating to watch. At number 2, Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart in Star Trek The Next Generation, with 4,184 votes. The difference between Patrick Stewart's portrayal of his captain of the Enterprise and William Shatner's of Kirk couldn't seem bigger. Don was the action hero who would brawl or romance every alien in the galaxy, and here was an older character who would quote Shakespeare and deal with situations with a calm air of authority. But the setup of Picard was firmly etched in Star Trek The Motion Picture and the Star Trek Phase 2 series from which it evolved. In that, Kirk had aged and was given a first officer who would do all the action scenes, allowing Kirk to be a more experienced and calm starship commander. Decker, the first officer, also had a previous history with a female alien officer aboard the Enterprise, Ilia, which is obviously the template for Picard, his younger first officer Riker, and Riker's past crush Troy. So, in some ways, Picard was just an older and more seasoned Kirk. Despite all the differences, Stewart's acting, however, won over scores of fans, and led to the now age-old geek question, who's better, Kirk or Picard? And if this poll says anything, more people now prefer Picard. One of the odder things about Picard, however, is how this extremely English actor is playing a Frenchman. And it really made me think when I realised when Picard talks about his ancestor taking part in the Battle of Trafalgar, he meant they were on the losing French side. And at number 1, Data, played by Brent Spiner in Star Trek The Next Generation, with 4,207 votes. Where Star Trek has always used its outsiders to take a look at what it means to be human, Data stands alone in all of Trek as the only alien character whose entire arc is about trying to become human. Data is an android, and when introduced to the series has no knowledge of his origins, having been discovered and awoken by a Federation starship, and then joined Starfleet to become an incredibly capable officer. Physically far superior to any of his human or even alien colleagues, his intellect was also vastly in excess of theirs, and as shown in one episode, he is capable of outwitting the entire crew and seizing control of the ship, with little the crew can do to stop him. But Data isn't just a machine, he's a totally synthetic person, designed to mimic every aspect of a human, from having a pulse, hair that grows, and simulated aging. Data lacks only one thing, emotions, much like his predecessor Spock. But where Spock had emotions but struggled to keep them in check, Data desires them in his quest to become more human. And it is this quest to learn, along with his childlike innocence and gaps in his knowledge, which make him such an interesting character. And one that not only gets some of the best lines in the show, but one who connected with the audience on such a level that they brought him back for the recent Picard series, even if it turns out it was just so they could kill him again. And that's it for this list of the top 5 Star Trek characters. So what did you think? Do you agree with the list? Or did someone you adore get missed? Should Chief O'Brien have dominated the list? Or do you feel Neelix was much maligned by his absence? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, or by getting in touch by email or through the website. Anyway, as always, many thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like what we're doing. But most of all, you look after yourselves, and we'll catch you later. Bye.